Hey everyone, I'm Adrian Alano and my topic is all about the art movement Dadaism, and I'm going to discuss about the history of Dadaism, its characteristics, Dada philosophy styles and methods, famous Dadaists and the famous artwork made by Marcel Duchamp. History of Dadaism. It is an artistic and literary movement that emerged in Zurich in 1916 out of opposition to the World War I. The nationalism medievally led to the war and the senselessness of its brutality. The movement itself is difficult to define because members wanted to evade the definition of a unified operation, entirely abandoning established artistic norms. It was the first conceptual art movement where the focus was not on crafting aesthetically pleasing art, but on creating things that challenge traditional art, the role of the artist, and the societal issues. It influences by Cubism, Expressionism, and Futurism. Dada art encompassed music, literature, painting, sculpture, performance art, photography, and puppetry. Below, explore how the principle of the Dada movement translate to the literature, and what we can learn from the spontaneity that characterized by the movement today. During the First World War, countless artists, writers, and intellectuals who opposed the war sought refuge in Switzerland in Zurich. In particular, it was a hub for people in exile, and it was here that Hugo Ball and Emmy Hemmings opened the Cabaret Walter on February 5 in 1960. And now I'll be discussing the different clubs in different places such as Zurich Dada movement in Germany. The driving force behind Zurich Dada was Tristan Tzara, aided by his volatile henchman Francis Picabia, recently returned from America and Barcelona. Zara and Picabia preach an increasingly subversive view of art and a nihilistic vision of life itself. From 1917 to 1921, they produced 8 issues of Dada magazine, which appeared in German and French. However, with the war's end, Switzerland's importance as a neutral haven declined. Richard Wilson-Beck, a founding member of Dada, left for Berlin. Picabia went to Paris, and when Zara followed him in 1920, the Zurich phase of Dada was over. The next movement was Dada in Berlin, also in Germany. Club Dada and Der Dada, both of which employed a robust use of explosive typography and photomontage. Berlin Dada artists were noted for their use of ready-mades, especially photomontage and early forms of assemblage, as well as their enthusiasm for technology. The next movement is Dada in Cologne, also in Germany. The Cologne branch was less political and more biased towards aesthetic, even if only in the sense of being anti-aesthetic. It included 2 major artists, Jean Arp and Max Ernst. Cologne witnessed one of the first Dada exhibitions in May 1920, Dada in Hanover. In 1918, the German artist Kurt Schwitters applied to join the Berlin Dadaists but was rebuffed for his unpolitical attitude. Schwitters' unique and unadulterated dedication to Dada ideas led to a prolific output of artworks constructed with urban refuse and found objects, which had a big influence on the later movements like junk art, assemblage, and art povera. The next movement is in New York. This branch was set up by Marcel Duchamp. Duchamp and Ray also collaborated with Catherine Derriere in setting up Societe Anonyme. The last movement was in Paris, in France. By 1921, many of the pioneers of Dada, such as Jean Arp, Marcel Duchamp, Max Ernst, Man Ray, Francis Picabia, and Tristan Tzara, had arrived in Paris, where they mingled with a number of French poets like André Breton and Louis Aragon. As a result, Paris Dada became noted for its theatrical, multicultural, though no less irreverent activities. But the Dada movement proved unable to contain the diverging ideas and personalities of its members. And now, I will be discussing the characteristics of Dadaism found in literature. First is humor. Laughter is often one of the first reactions to Dada art and literature. Ready-mades and poems were right with humor, silliness, and visual plots. By inducing creativity, Dada writers were able to portray a sense of lightness, but also imply a deeper meaning which often challenge cultural. And next is whimsy and nonsense. Much like humor, most everything created during the Dada movement was absurd, paradoxical, and composed harmony. Next is artistic freedom. Dada artists rejected cultural standards and values, and were thus dissatisfied with traditional division of art could be. Next is emotional reaction. Since Dadaism grew out of reaction to the war, the movement was marked by revolt and protest. Everything written, created, danced, and performed was intended to oppose all established sets of protocol and create shock value. Rationalism. Dada writers and poets used free association as a writing tool where they would write everything they thought and felt without censoring it. Another way writers drew upon irrationalism was to incorporate chance and randomness into the creations. Spontaneity. Dada artists were equally spontaneous in their collective bodies of work. They used improvisation to appeal individuality and further challenge accepted artistic practice. Ready-mades or found objects re-objectified as art. Photomontage, art collage, assembled from a huge variety of materials. All of these were new forms of art developed by Dadaists as a way to explore older forms while emphasizing found art aspects. And now we'll be moving on to the famous Dadaists. First is Jean Arp. He is a poet and sculptor, a former student at the Strasbourg School of Art and Craft. Arp went to Munich in 1912, where he knew Kandinsky and showed a number of semi-figurative expressionist drawings at the second Diplo Painter exhibition. Next is Marcel Duchamp. He is an avant-garde artist. He is one of Europe's most radical 20th century painters and a founder of junk art. Duchamp's first outstanding, if controversial, work was Nude Descending a Staircase No. 2 in 1912, which exemplified the style of analytical cubism in a manner which anticipated later futurist forms. Next is Max Ernst. He is a painter, sculptor, graphic artist, and a poet. He is a lifelong friend of Jean Arp. Ernst was a prolific, highly experimental artist, and after serving in World War I, he became one of the pioneers of both Dada. He founded the Cologne branch and Surrealism. Next is Raoul Haussmann. He is a painter and photographer. He was a leading member of the satirical and highly political Berlin branch of Dada, where in 1918 he pioneered the technique of photomontage, the art of affixing and juxtaposing photographs or other found illustrative material onto a flat surface, not unlike an embellished type of collage. This is Man Ray. He is a painter and photographer. Man Ray had his first solo show of paintings and drawings in 1915. His first Dada-style work, an assemblage called Self-Portrait, was shown in 1916. In 1921, he left America to live and work in Paris, where he created one of his best-known Dadaist artworks, Indestructible Object. He also taught himself the art of photography, rapidly becoming one of the greatest photographers in Europe. Next is Francis Picabia. He is a painter and avant-garde artist. He is one of the few avant-garde artists to be financially independent due to his father's wealth and position as a Cuban diplomat. In 1913, Picabia traveled to New York, where his work was included in the Armour Show. Next is Tristan Tzara. He was an avant-garde Romanian poet and performance artist, as well as a journalist, playwright, art critic, and film director. He became one of the pioneer activists of Dada in Zurich, where he shows at the Cabaret Voltaire, and as well as his writings and manifestos were the driving features of extremist dadaism. Lastly is Kurt Skaters. He is a collage artist. He is one of the few purists in the Dada movement based in Hanover, where he founded his own branch of Dada. He became renowned for using fragments of refuse, which to make sense of a word that he found politically, culturally, and socially mad.
The LHOOQ, also made by Marcel Duchamp. As you can see the picture, the Mona Lisa's deep-set eyes and round face do not conflict with Duchamp's act of violence. The beard and mustache seem a completion, but Duchamp said that the Mona Lisa becomes a man, not a woman disguised as a man, but a real man. This hints at a different meaning from vandalism, for all the crudeness of those letters, LHOOQ, which sound out the French sentence, "She has a hot arse." This is not simply an attack on the mass-produced tourist icon that the Mona Lisa had become, but rather an interpretation of it. Duchamp's Mona Lisa is a Freudian joke. Duchamp reveals in a simple gesture that which the painting conceals. This is not merely an allusion to Freud. Duchamp uncovers an ambiguity of gender at the heart of Leonardo's aesthetic, that Leonardo sees the male form in the female. This kind of hidden self-portrait is what Duchamp discovers in his rectified ready-made. His Dadaist intervention redeems Leonardo's masterpiece from the banality of reproduction and returns it to the private world of creation.
Dada collections can be seen at Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris, Tate Modern Gallery in London, Museum of Modern Art in New York, and Philadelphia Museum of Art in Philadelphia. World behind the text. Dadaism started as a form of protest against the ludicrousness and outrageousness of the modernism. The cabaret served as a commonplace for the avant-garde artists. The Dada arts were considered to be anti-art, because among these works of art, they have become one of the celebrated masterpieces because the meaning behind each work opened a door to future developments in the 20th century art. World of the text. There had been numerous artists known like Marcel Duchamp, Tristan Tzara, Marcel Janco, Hugo Boll, Emmy Hennings. But among all the artists mentioned, Marcel Duchamp is the most popular artist who created a number of painting, sculptures, and collage. His art style is of Cubism, Futurism, and early conceptual art. He has been a huge influence on the 20th century modernist sculpture. The fountain consists of a porcelain urinal signed R. Mott. In April 1917, was one of the earliest known ready-made sculpture, which was submitted to the Paris Salon. However, it was rejected because it was not considered as an art, because ready-made sculptures are made from found objects. The signature Armat was actually of German origin, Urmat, which means poverty, or it may be Urmater, which means a great mother. The fountain was recreated by Duchamp in 1964 for the cover of an exhibition catalog. It was an illustration which appeared as a photographic negative. However, Duchamp made a positive version called Mirrorical Return, wherein the position of the urinal was tilted 90 degrees instead of seeing it in a negative way. The position mirrored that of a fountain and is no longer seen as a urinal, with a change in position meant a different meaning behind the art. World before the text. Before the Dadaism movement, artists have celebrated their works in the form of painting and sculpture, the same way as to evoke the society of their current situation but using a different style. The movement wanted to reform the society using the power of reason, which lasted from 1650 to 1800. They promoted reason, science, and intellectual exchange. This was a move in response to the ability to exchange information easily through mass printing and a way to let people be more aware of the negative effects of the previous system, which were more based on church and tradition.
Exegesis. While all the works of art from Dada artists may have not been taken seriously, particularly that of Duchamp's fountain, the whimsical symbolism of each art portrays a very significant factor in the society. Existing objects may be perceived according to how they are currently used. However, when each art is carefully scrutinized, no matter how incredulous or worthless it may seem, there is always something that was rejected and thrown out of a 1917 New York exhibition, became one of the most influential artwork in the world. His art were funny and unconventional, particularly that of the urinal from the fountain, but drew out challenge to the audience.